Good morning. How
Good
was your
morning.
trip in from San Francisco?
Not too bad. Delayed for a few hours, but I'm here.
Yeah, well, look, welcome to snow and cold New York. It's good to have you in person. Very excited for this. I know we spoke a little bit over the last couple of weeks in terms of what we could discuss. I think there's, multitude of conversations we could have. Trying to condense this into a short one podcast take might be tough, but
Yeah.
maybe we can do a few more recordings if the audience likes the content.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, look, maybe just for those that don't know exactly who you are, what you're doing right now, it'd be awesome to kind of get a quick overview, maybe 3 or 4 minute introduction to yourself, what your journey to date has been like in the kind of fintech startup world.
I'm Angelique Strauss, CEO and founder of AScaleX. Before then, I was actually CGO at Novo Payment, and I also worked for payments and crypto. But before then, I was actually a journalist. So storytelling is actually a main driver for me to be in this industry as well.
Okay, amazing. And just going on three things there. So you mentioned journalism was what you'd done prior to getting into payments. Do you mind if we just touch on that slightly?
Yeah, I mean, like the reason why I was inclined to payments because I think it touches everyday lives from
Mm,
ordering your dinner
yeah,
to like saving for your first house and everything in between. And I think journalism is the same. Like you're telling stories of people and how you're passionate about like specific things. And I think the fintech is the closest thing to that in tech.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say that every software business is going to become a fintech or a payments business. We've seen a lot of embedded players in recent years come out with statements like that, and of
Yeah.
course on the vertical SaaS side. And just coming back to then, so you mentioned you entered payments. What sort of payments was that when you first?
It's actually processing payments,
Okay.
so, to, like, emerging markets. So if you're a merchant, let's say you're an Uber,
Mm,
expanding to LATAM or Asia, so you need to be localized
yeah.
and be able to accept local payments. So we're the company to kinda, like, help with that, and having that infrastructure, collecting the payments, on your behalf and repatriating that amount to either USD or whichever banking account you want to. So it's basically helping with a lot of digital merchants.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool. And then if we kind of switch over to Nova Payment, do you want to just give a kind of overview as to what Nova Payments do and who they are?
Yeah, so Novo Payment works as a banking as a service provider. So most of the time, we work with fintechs
Mm,
also and providing their service. But we want to think about ourselves as like sort of the connector from like the different rails, right? So if you want to provide, let's say, payouts, if you want to provide like different services that a bank can do, you go to us and we design it for you,
awesome.
and we help you kind of like roll that out in your market as.
Amazing. Okay. And then you were with Nova Payments for just over 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years.
What was I know we always say it's like dog years or cat years when you join a startup because how quickly things can move. Do you mind if we get an overview as to maybe what size the business was once you joined, and then obviously what size it was once you departed?
Yeah, it didn't feel 4 years, it went by so quickly. When I joined Novo Payment, they were still kind of bootstrapped.
Amazing.
When I was talking to Annabelle, the CEO then, we were talking about, like, her vision for
Yeah.
the company and how they're thinking of raising funds and expanding in the US. And I was actually hired to kind of facilitate that,
Amazing.
to kind of help with funding as well as expanding in the US and doubling down on Latin America. And so I came in the picture very early on. I think that was during COVID,
Oh wow. Oh
actually,
wow.
like 2020, if I'm not mistaken, or oh my gosh, 21. And so the team is also very small then. So mainly Annabelle's still part of a lot of the sales process.
No,
And I kind of removed her from that role and make sure that the infrastructure of the team can support the volume that we wanted to do. And so the first thing we did was to expand and actually hire a few more folks that actually embed in Latin America.
okay.
We also then start working on our preparing for our first Series A.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you touched on there. I think with businesses, naturally, whenever it's the founder who's got the first million or first X customers on board, it's tough for that founder-led sales mentality to, I suppose it's hard for them to give up the reins. Um, I suppose what would your advice be to founders when you find it difficult to give up the reins, or equally, how did you operate in that?
Having a good relationship with the CEO is number one.
Okay,
Annabelle really trusts me and in terms of like giving her guidance, like, hey, you have to kind of like focus more on the CEO
of
role
course.
rather than being, part of the sales process. And it was very difficult for her because she's very hands-on.
Mm,
And so we did it very like slowly when we hired like senior folks in LATAM and she can see that they can actually handle the
yeah.
role. She slowly like, kind of give way. But then at the same time, she still have very sticky relationships with a lot of our clients, which is kind of like challenging one of the challenges I've seen actually in the role because
Okay.
it's very cultural in
Yeah.
Latin
Yeah.
America. They're
Yeah.
very heavy on relationships. And even if you have like an infrastructure set, they will still call the CEO if they want to.
Okay.
But it's all about also telling Annabelle to kind of like, training her
Yeah.
to sort of like understand the process.
Yeah.
So you're almost doing it external and internal at the
Yeah.
same time. But it was actually like working for us for sure at
Okay.
Novo Payment, yeah, during
Awesome.
that time.
Good stuff. I know you've touched on it just now in terms of hiring the right people in those geographics, and I appreciate, was it 15 different markets within the LATAM area you guys were
Yeah.
in, which is a lot, right? I think sometimes people go LATAM and think it's just one region and hire maybe one person to go and attack it. But we spoke a little bit prior to hitting record about getting the right people in the right seats down there and
Mhm.
understanding the cultural differences between one country versus another. Do you want to just touch on that a little?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of people have, especially if you're coming from the US, there's some misconception about if you're expanding in LATAM, you can just hire one
Mm,
person and then have them sit in one country and handle the whole
yeah.
region. One of the things I've learned at Novo Payment is the complexity of that as well. Like, there's a way of like how Mexico
Mm,
companies do business compared to like, let's say, Colombia
of
or
course. Yeah.
Peru or, CARCAM and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So you have to navigate that complexity as
Yeah.
well. And hiring the right people is actually key.
Okay.
And also hiring the people who can navigate the politics within those
Yeah.
countries. That's
Yeah.
also very essential.
One other thing you mentioned just a few seconds ago was when you joined the business, it was bootstrapped, and then obviously you were there during the kind of Series A
Mhm.
fundraising. You also touched on journalism, so you're naturally a very good storyteller. I suppose during that journey, what were maybe some of the key lessons and learnings from potentially pitching to investors and then getting that investment on board?
Yeah, I think the main thing that drive our Series A, for example, was the growth that we're experiencing with our current customers at that time,
Yeah.
the volume we're getting there. And then we also have a good pipeline going for us
Okay.
during that time. So the first thing that we actually focus on when I joined the company is growing a good pipeline.
Okay.
So having the infrastructure to support that was my main role. So when I first came in, I made sure that all of our systems are plugged in because as you can imagine, with any bootstrap company experiencing growth, they don't really have a system.
Yeah.
Like every department kind of like works on their own path.
Yeah.
And so my role was to connect all of that. So
Interesting.
from, top of funnel to when they go in, our sales process to like once they onboarded as a client
Yeah.
and then putting that program together. Even like how will the customer success manage clients and then potentially doing like an upsell
Mm.
opportunity. And then they didn't have that before.
Oh,
So we had to design that from scratch. And that's very important if you're growing because like it needs to actually be tied together.
yeah.
Like where you're getting your leads, what's the reason why you're not closing deals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also like if there's opportunity for you to double down on a
Mm.
client. And that's very essential for our growth at Nova Payment. We were able to do that.
Interesting. I think two things come to mind there. One is predictability, and then
Yes.
obviously repeatability as well. In the sense that
Mm-hmm.
if you've got a system or a process that you can follow, you can obviously then implement that, and new hires can kind of follow that structure. Do you mind if we touch on that a little bit more in the sense that, like, if I was a founder and I had a 50-person organization and we were trying to land some of the larger logos that you guys had at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys ended up getting a partnership with Mastercard, so on.
Visas.
Amazing, right? So two of the biggest conglomerates in the payments ecosystem. How does I don't want to say an unknown brand, but how does maybe a smaller brand approach businesses like that? Like, how do you win those sort of logos when you're at the size that you guys were?
I think it's more of, I mean, it's more of like having, like our ducks in a row as a
Yeah.
company, like making sure like all your processes are intact. One of the things that were struggling when I first came in. And we have RFPs. Like the
Okay.
sales process for banking as a service is crazy.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
can take from 6 to 12 months, even more sometimes if it's a bigger
Interesting.
deal.
Yeah.
And RFP itself can take like 2 months to 3 months, depending on how
Yeah.
we're working with 500-page documents.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, like having the right process to be able to answer that at scale
Yeah. Yeah.
is one of the things that we've done too. Like
Okay.
we created like a system internally and work with different vendors to kind of like help us with that.
Yeah.
So from like a month or 2 months worth of RFP, we're able to do that in 1 week. And we look very professional. We don't look like, we're a bootstrap
I got
company.
you. Yeah.
So that's also very important. You have to basically run your company the same thing as them and be able to support that. That's
Okay.
that's very important for us
Interesting.
during that
Interesting.
time.
Amazing. And then I know again you were there through amazing amount of growth and fundraising. I think coming back to the storytelling piece, when you're walking up to investors, and I appreciate what you mentioned there might be similar in the sense that how you present yourself to MasterCard is maybe how you present yourself to JP Morgan when you're going for funding.
Yeah.
How did you go about that fundraising journey? And I suppose maybe coming back slightly, what was the reason for going for the funding? I know initially you guys were bootstrapped. Was a part of your role to bring that kind of gravitas and go, right, okay, we've now got a chief growth officer with an amazing background who's now going to propel us into X, Y, and Z? Or what was that kind of experience like? And I suppose what learnings is there potentially for other founders who are considering, going for funding?
Yeah. Like I think the first thing is having the right data to support your funding round.
Oh,
Having, let's say, for example, the pipeline to support that, the growth to show that.
yeah,
Like, what are you seeing? What are you forecasting? And I also like we worked on even positioning Annabelle as a leader in the space because
interesting.
at
Okay.
the same time, like a lot of investors also looked into how can you execute,
Of
like
course.
who is the team behind this.
Yeah.
So in some cases, like we also expose our leads in the sales side to kind of like show that, hey, we can actually execute on the numbers we're talking about,
Okay.
as well as we do have the pipe to show you that this is the growth we're thinking. And the reason why we also raise because we want to expedite our growth.
Yeah.
I mean, we can grow with what we have, but it will not be in the intensity that we want.
Makes sense.
So that's I think one of the main reasons why we decided to raise.
During that experience, I'm sure there's probably multiple businesses that were interested or hedge funds or VCs that were interested in kind of, or sorry, private equity firms or VCs that were interested in investing in the business. Were your guys' criteria when going for that funding, and what would your advice be to founders who maybe have 3 or 4 offers on the table from different investors that are looking to invest in?
I think finding the right partner that you want to collaborate with, not just finding the first one to give you the cash.
Mm,
I think that's key. Like that you can actually grow together. They can introduce you to the right folks, tapping into their network.
interesting.
I think for founders looking for funding, that's essential. They're not just looking for like actual funding, but they're looking for like, hey, there's more added value if
Yeah,
we
of course.
partner with this VC firm because they can actually expand our network more.
Interesting. I have also heard a few horror stories from businesses in the sense that, and I don't think it's common practice, but there definitely is firms out there that will have strange clause when they invest in startups. Is there anything that you would say founders should be wary of or cautious of? I think what you've given there is really good advice in terms of what to look for, but I'd be excited about. But maybe on the flip side, is there anything to look for and just be cautious of?
I think like you can actually, I mean, at least working really close with the executive team during this time is like you have a good gut feel if it's a good partnership or not,
Okay.
or if it's a one-way partnership or
Yeah.
not. So I think having as a founder, if you're racing right now, like that gut feel is always right. Like you can always tell if the partnership is going
Yeah.
in the right direction or not. And like even having the same mission is key because
Okay.
sometimes you can see that too. Like
Yeah.
at times too, there are some competing, for example, brands within the same portfolio. Do you want to be there?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Because maybe there are some reasons behind why they want to fund you guys and stuff. So you kind of have to look beyond the numbers and everything else, but also trust your judgment when it comes to finding the right partner.
I see.
Yeah.
Um, and then just coming back to your role, so you were head of growth or CGO at Nova Payment, right?
Mhm.
So what is that role? What is it? It's CGO versus a CMO versus like a CRO?
Yeah, so at Novo Payment, on how we kind of define my role is I handle the sales and marketing side.
Both.
For both,
Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
both sides. I mean, the difference of that is really different based on the company.
Got it.
It kind of like in some companies they have a CGO and a CMO and a CRO.
Yeah.
In some companies, it's all reporting under CRO or under CMO. So
Yeah.
it really depends on how they designed it. and what the KPIs are behind. But I think the good thing about having, let's say, one owner of your pipeline as well as designing the campaigns, you can actually move quicker instead of like having like different heads. But that's not also a deal breaker if everybody is collaborative.
Yeah, of course.
But in some cases, you also have to navigate politics within the internal team. But if you're still in that stage of you're just starting up a company, I
Yeah,
think that's hard. So it's faster to move with a smaller team at times. And so I've seen it play out in both models.
interesting.
But for my role, it was actually more streamlined because yeah, I manage with my team, all the campaigns that come out in all the markets, as well as looking out for our pipeline and then making sure the customer is actually getting what they need so we can actually upsell to them. So if you think about it, the whole funnel
Yeah.
from when they enter to like when we upsell.
I think what we've seen sometimes is there can be obviously very collaborative environments, which you mentioned there, or equally there could be environments where the CRO and the CMO are both targeted with bringing in revenue, and then they
Hmm.
both try to, I suppose, attach what their activities were to the revenue
Exactly.
that
Yeah,
was.
the
So,
attribution. And sometimes if it's not designed correctly, they will end up like instead of collaborating, like fighting against
yeah,
who did what and whose project is this and who really made an impact. And so that needs a lot of founders need to be like very careful with that. Because designing those roles and what their responsibility and their KPI is really essential. At least that's my point of view.
of course. No, that's good advice. I think we've seen it as well, where that's potentially some of the reasons why CROs or CMOs or chief growth officers start to look for new roles is because of the environment that they're in, and it may not be the product, it may not be the team, it's just the way that the comp structure maybe is set up. So
And then to add to that too, Ross, is like, I'm sure you know this, CRO and CMO have the highest churn,
yeah,
right? I mean, 1 out of 3
yeah,
every year leave their job. And I think the reason for that is misalignment.
hmm,
Like sometimes I've seen, at least with what we're doing now, is that like, yes, you are a CMO or a CRO, but you're not given like the fuel to actually execute what you
hmm,
need to
yeah,
because you don't have a reporting line.
yeah,
So because there's another, let's say, a person who's assigned to execute, and then you have your KPI, but you cannot really like execute on
yeah,
that because nobody's reporting to you,
yeah,
or it's not the organization is not designed to help you.
hmm,
And so I think that's one of the challenges. Like it's the biggest high reward, like high risk role, if you may think about it.
yeah. It's interesting. I mean, we definitely speak to a lot of founders that are maybe confidentially looking to replace their CRO or the chief marketing officer. And the question we'll ask is how long have they been in this seat, and how is their performance? What's the metrics you're measuring them off? And oftentimes it's, oh, they've been in seat for 6 months, but they haven't brought any new clients. It's like, well, I don't know if you'd expect them to land master card in the first 6 months.
Yeah,
They have to
yeah.
learn the product, learn the team, et cetera, et
And
cetera.
I've seen this too. Like if things don't work, the first head to be cut is those roles, but they don't see like, hey, can we check our product market
Hmm.
fit? Can we check our pricing? Can
Yeah,
we check how we actually, go to market? There's a lot of things
yeah,
at play that a lot of founders kind of miss because they
yeah,
just think like, oh, if we're not selling, it's the marketing
yeah,
department's
yeah,
problem
yeah,
or the sales problem or
100%.
something.
Yeah, I think,
Even if they're burning so much cash on the product, and then
yeah,
if you compare how much money they burn on product versus like burning on marketing and sales, they don't see this piece because it takes a while for them to see
of
that.
course. Yeah,
Compared here, everything is attributed, so
yeah,
all they can see is
yeah,
like, hey, you spent $1 million and you didn't get anything,
yeah,
it's not working. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So
yeah,
it's
of course.
easier to make that decision.
I think, well, for, I suppose, a chief revenue officer or CMO in particular, I think with the founders, when they bring on these big hires, they can be expensive because one, they may not be producing revenue in that first 6 to 12 months. And of course, they've maybe got a big salary, maybe they've got a big stake of equity, and they're obviously spending a lot of money hiring salespeople or marketing people or spending money on campaigns. But again, you have to think back to during your interview process and during your vetting process, did you hire the right person? And
Yeah.
if you did, then you need to make sure that you're giving them the tools and the investment for them to go and execute on their
Yeah, all
job.
the support.
Equally, I do appreciate it is one of the more expensive mistakes we have seen businesses make, in the sense that they've hired a CRO because they've got a massive logo, or they've hired a chief marketing officer because they've worked at Chime, and that person at Chime done unbelievable amounts of things. It's like, yes, but Chime may be slightly different to what your product is, and therefore may not necessarily fit what your go-to-market strategy is. And I think maybe a little bit more vetting in the interview process, maybe doing some background references, making sure that you get the right person on board, and then
Yeah.
once you've made that decision, invest in them fully and allow them to take the reins, and not be stuck in their way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think more than the logos too, the important piece is how much this person is willing to do to actually
Mm,
execute
of
on those
course.
goals. Because for example, like if you're early stage, like having those good logos, I think that's maybe helpful if you're funding because
Hmm.
that's also part of like unfortunately a lot of like pieces are this they care about like those
Yeah,
logos to be like, oh, our executive team are from this and all of
yeah,
that. But like if you're early stage, really want to grow your pipeline, like you need to look for a partner that will actually willing to get their hands
hmm,
dirty
yeah,
with you
yeah,
because like you don't have that luxury of like having a battalion to
yeah,
support you. It will start small
of
and
course.
then you will go from there.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so I think that's very key too that people would I mean at least founders would have to really think about like the willingness and the passion
of
of
course.
this person to bring you to the next
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've seen that on the shoe on the other foot in the sense that the CRO joins a business from a larger firm and thinks that they're going to have all that support in place. And
Yeah,
actually, there's not. They're the person if their laptop breaks that they need to ring IT or whatever it may be. And I know it's a silly
exactly. No, no,
example,
no,
but
sir. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen this play out too.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've seen it with sellers as well. That there's some heads of sales that are working their network. They're picking up the phone, they're going to events, and then on the other side, we've seen heads of sales join and go, wait a minute, I'm not a sales rep. I'm not an SDR. I'm the head of sales. I'm not picking up the phone, and
Yeah.
it can be an interesting environment.
Mhm.
What I would love to move on to a little bit is what you're currently doing now, right? So, do you want to just give a little bit of an overview as to what you're doing at this moment in time and how you're helping fintechs and startups?
Yeah, so I run ScaleX, which is an agency to
Nice.
help with a lot of tech companies, fintechs, to go to market.
Yeah.
So basically, what I've done with the companies I work for before and kind of like productize that. So I build
Amazing.
a team to support that. We help in terms of like just plugging in your current infrastructure. In some cases, we're designed to stay with you until a specific KPI, or in some cases, we're helping you get ready for that role
Okay.
until you get that funding. I mean, hiring for that
Yeah.
role. So for that, your point earlier, like until they get like funding to get a CGO or a CMO or
Yeah.
whatnot, we help kind of like establish that infrastructure for them
Okay.
and get that momentum going until that person can actually come in.
Okay. Amazing. I can think of a few benefits to that right away. Obviously, if you're an early stage business and you want someone with your sort of background, if you're not a talent magnet, if you've not got the funding, you've not got the
Hmm.
product ready to go, you've not got proof of concept with loads of customers, it's going to be very difficult then to get someone of your background to join full time. So naturally,
Yeah.
there's a huge benefit there. I suppose from that experience, is there certain challenges that you see in a lot of those early stage businesses? And I suppose, is there certain areas that you feel you guys are helping the most with those businesses? Is it on the go-to-market side? Is it the branding? Is it the storytelling? Like, what are some of the key areas that maybe those, let's say, seed to Series B and C businesses are struggling with most?
Yeah, I think it's mostly like positioning that we help
Okay.
a lot and then their go to market, like
Yeah.
which medium should they double down with,
Okay.
right? Like and then which campaigns can they get the most leads in. So that's basically where a lot of our clients sit. Most of the time they come in and be like, "Hey, we've spent this amount of money and we're not seeing a lot of traction. Can
Yeah.
you help us? What can we do with this?"
Okay.
And then what we usually do is like, "Okay, run us to what you guys are doing today and then we'll provide you some insights of what we think we should be doing
Yeah.
and then go from there. So in some cases it's tweaking on like how they position the product.
Okay.
In some cases it's also tweaking on the pricing model that they have. And in some cases just changing their whole go to market,
Okay.
like the campaigns itself that we
Yeah.
need to fix for them. So
Interesting.
it really depends on where they are. There's no like a plugin like an actual like formula for everybody.
Mhm.
So it really depends on where the company is at currently.
Okay, interesting. And again, I've spoken to multiple people that maybe have had successful exits or maybe have been a part of successful journeys and are now, I suppose, similar to you, sharing that experience with a multitude of different businesses. Some have come up from like the sales route, where they've been an SDR, account executive, and head of sales. Others have maybe come up from the marketing route, right, just like yourself. So my question to you is, I suppose, when you're thinking about go to market, I appreciate position is important, but how can these clients of yours start to generate more customers? Is there and I appreciate with 2026, there's a lot of talk about AI SDRs, and there's a lot of talk about cold emailing is dead or whatever it may be. So I'm just curious, like, when these customers who have maybe little logos or they're unknown businesses trying to get into Mastercard or some of these other firms like fintechs and banks, outside of position and like how can they start to generate more revenue? Like what's the 2 or 3 levers that they can pull in order to start generating more leads and get that top of funnel?
Yeah, I think the main key that at least the first thing come to mind right now is consistency. So like it's very crucial for early stage companies to actually first have a product that really solve a problem that's essential.
Of course. Yeah.
And then in terms of like a go to market, I don't really buy into those cold email is dead,
Mhm.
SEO is dead, all of this. I don't believe that. It's just doing it right.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we have campaigns that it's cold email and it's working for
Nice.
us.
Okay.
I mean, we help some companies do their paid ads and we were able to generate over 5 million in
Oh
pipeline.
wow. Okay.
So it's just doing it right. I
Yeah.
mean, the challenging part, AI is amazing for marketers because it kind of like help us move faster. But at the same time, it also is our biggest nemesis because it made like content really easy access
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
everybody. Now if you can see it's very noisy
Yeah.
everywhere. So how do you stand out from that noise and having like a very creative mind to think of like what type of campaign? So like the usual campaigns that you run for conferences before might not work anymore. So
Yeah.
you have to actually like think of creative ways to stand out, you know? And I think that's definitely one of the things that if you're bootstrapped, if you're don't have that funding yet, just think of really great ways to create those experiences for your buyers to stand out from everybody. And most of the time, those things don't need money. It just needs creativity.
Yeah, I think, well, as you said there, it's not dead, but it's just the level or the standard has had to increase in order to stand out from the crowd or kind of
Yeah.
escape from the noise. So that's really good. And I suppose again, is there certain challenges that you find that businesses at this stage you advise are commonly facing? Like, is there certain trends that you're noticing coming into this year that there's a lot of businesses asking about this, or is there certain things that they're struggling with?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of interesting conversations with founders about how do we, explore AI.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is a very cliche topic, at least like been talked about so many
Yeah.
times, but I think the first thing I always ask them is like, what are the problem are we trying to solve? Because sometimes they get the pressure from their board.
Of course.
They're just saying like, hey, I just need to show in my 25 end of year deck that this is my plan for
Yeah.
26. And this is funny because like I'm like, okay, but what we're trying to solve. And so is it gonna be the amount of revenue per rep? Is this gonna be about like your cost per lead or
Yeah.
whatever? There's a lot of things you can solve with AI,
Yeah.
but you also need to be careful because we've also seen stories of companies who dive into AI
Yeah.
who were not successful. So you have it in my like opinion, like you have to go at it like understanding what problems you're trying to solve, understanding what KPI to show you that, hey, this is working, rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that has been one of the topics. And then the other one is really like allocating of their budget. Like, where do they allocate their budget? Are they allocating it on, I guess this is related to that topic, to hiring or
Yeah.
to augmenting
Yeah.
workforce? So those are the like questions that came up in the past. But I think it will never replace relationships with people.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So and in growth, I think in sales, in marketing, it's very high touch, especially in a lot of the brands that I've handled before. It's high touch, it's high ticket items.
Mhm.
So I don't think that will ever be.
Of
You will
course.
never expect AI to close a million deal,
Yeah.
but will it help a rep to move faster,
Yeah.
finish the RFP faster, get
Yeah. Of
the
course.
notes and move like deals faster? Yes, but that relationship piece will always be there.
I think no true words have ever been spoken. I think especially in 2026, like everyone's leaning in on the relationship side, which is awesome and brilliant to see. But coming back to the AI piece in particular, is there particular, I suppose, use cases that AI has been beneficial to clients that you've seen? So whether that's, I know you mentioned maybe with notes or helping speed up our RFPs, but is there certain use cases? Maybe I shouldn't ask for product recommendations, but is there any recommendations as to what startups can go and do now to kind of, like, what actionable steps can startups take to implement AI that maybe isn't too complicated, but definitely will help get the kind of biggest bang for their buck?
Yeah, I guess I can answer that in a sense of we think of AI, at least from what I've seen in the market, I've also in talks with a lot of AI founders. It's interesting to see what it can do now deeper than that.
Yeah, yeah,
So, for example, I'm going to give a shout out to Vivun. So, what they do is they have like an agent that can help like a salesperson. They basically have an assistant and it expedite the deal by like helping them like navigate all. It joins the call, gives the basically if you're a rep, it assists you throughout the process.
No,
It helps you with like all the tasks that you don't want to do. It's not another tool, right?
yeah,
Because the other thing that I've seen too, at least in my experience handling sales teams, they don't even want to have a CRM. And so introducing another tool is gonna be like, they just want to
more
shake
admin.
hands and
Yeah,
really, expand the relationship. So I think finding the right tool, if you may, means like less tool and more of like how can this help me close my quota quicker. So in terms of like if you're looking for things that you want to add to your tech stack this
yeah,
year, I think focus on that,
gotcha.
less of like the tooling piece, but more of like less tool but like bigger problems that they're solving, right? Because before, I think we're past like, we need to have all these 30 tools to
Mhm.
make this work. It's more about like let's try to streamline and then lessen that so that it's easier for that human to
Yeah,
actually function, right? So that's just my personal
no, that's really, really good advice. So I think I'm guilty of the CRM, and I
right?
think I
Like
must have fair
that's
experiences with
I
it.
mean,
So
working with sales team, they hated that. Oh, I hate updating my CRM
yeah,
so that we can come up with a dashboard, all of these things. You don't have to do that now.
yeah,
There
amazing.
are a lot of ways that you can do like automated.
Amazing. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I think then just in order to maybe kind of wrap up and conclude, I think this has been a really, really useful, insightful conversation. So thanks very much for hopping on. What I'd love to know is where can the audience find you, and what can they reach out to you for?
Yeah. They can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn
Okay.
and Strauss or on our website, scalex.com. Happy to even just chat. I mean, I do this a lot with founders. They don't have to commit working with us,
Mhm.
even just chatting what they're doing, what the challenges they have, and how we can, we solve that with other clients. Just exchange notes. I think it's always healthy to always have that pulse of the market. And I love having those conversations.
You had a dinner in San Francisco recently with a lot of founders as
Yes,
well, right?
yes. So we do a lot of those, interactions as well.
Yeah,
So we try to kind of like keep it up with the press also. That's actually a
amazing.
mix of press and founders and operators because we also want to hear what they're hearing out there in the market, what
Yeah.
challenges they're facing, how they're solving it. And then we kind of also share what we've been experiencing. I think it's important to always have that
Mhm.
in a room where there's no judgment. We're just here all learning and navigating
Yeah.
this, especially in this like industry that we have right now. It's super. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah, I know we touched on it prior to the conversation about stable coins, embedded fintechs, and all these different applications and all the different ways fintech can go over the next decade or so. And maybe we'll ask you the question of like, what is your predictions, or where do you see fintech in the next decade? Is there certain areas that you find that will have the biggest growth? Kind of, I would love to kind of get your take on that as well.
yeah. I mean, I think fintech will always grow in such a way that we're seeing it now. It's just because it's part of our daily lives. So it's either, I mean, from at least what I'm going to see is like it will continue to be embedded in
Hmm.
what we do. And even like having like it designed to different generation and stuff like that. Like right now, like having it more accessible in different ways. I think that's key.
Awesome. Well, look, I think that's us bang on the money. I appreciate you hopping on. I think it was a great conversation, super insightful. I'm looking forward to the audience listening in. As you said, I'll put any of your contact details on the bottom as well, so everyone knows where to find you.
Yeah. Thanks,
Awesome.
Ross.
Thanks so
This is
much. I
fun.
appreciate it.